Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled The United Nation of Yisra'el, Part 3. Then you shall see the difference between the righteous and the wrong, between one who serves Elohim and one who does not. The podcast objectives are analyze the link between the seal of Elohim and salvation, reveal why many are blind to the spiritual forces that lead to division, reveal the two fates upon all who have been called, and reveal how the tares are destroying this nation. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. We are not saved. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome back to our Word from a Watchman series. In our most recent lesson, we analyze how unity will play a major role in our ability to survive these last days, to wit, the great distress that is on the way. Along these lines, we are drawing near to the conclusion of the sealing of the set apart ones. Ergo, the day of salvation is coming to an end. And here is what you need to know about this end. Get this. The last person in the renewed nation of Israel will be sealed before the current season comes to an end. Per the timeline below, men and women will not be sealed at the last minute, i.e., right before the second great Exodus. Quite the contrary, the majority who will be sealed have been sealed, or we are being sealed even now, even the 11th hour worker. We know this because it will take time for Yahuwah to prepare us for the great distress, and it will take time for us to flee mystery Babel. Now, this analysis is in line with the parable of the 10 virgins and many of the parables that reveal the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. That is, the interval where the 5 wise virgins were waiting for the bridegroom, and the 5 foolish virgins went out to buy oil for their lamps. In like manner, many will look to obtain the seal of Elohim at the last minute, and while they are looking, the door to the renewed nation of Israel will be shut. And From that point on, no one will be sealed, even though the day of salvation as a season will not be over. Here is why. Obtaining the seal of Elohim alone does not save you. Quite the contrary, your willingness to walk in obedient faith to the will of Elohim will save you. And this is why you were sealed. That said, you must continue to walk in obedient faith to retain the seal you were given. And this is why the day of salvation does not end the moment the last person in this nation has been sealed. Quite the contrary, for we must endure all the tests and trials upon this season. And thus we conclude we may have been sealed, but we, my friends, are not saved, and we must be saved. No doubt, this is why Yahuwah has called me to continue this exposition of lawlessness and to launch this Watchmen series. It is to show you how you can consistently fulfill all the requirements upon the seal of Elohim. And one of the primary keys to your success is unity. Remember, there is strength in numbers as long as you have the right numbers. Ergo, we must continue to analyze how Yahuwah is uniting the set apart ones who have obtained his seal so that we can maintain the seal that we were given and so that we will all one day be saved. Let's get started. They were blind to what they saw. Now, as you know, from the first two podcasts in this series, Malachi 3:16 through 18 is the foundational scripture passage for Project Unity. And I would like to address one final phrase from this passage in this podcast. Malachi 3:18 is revealing. Then you shall again see the difference between the righteous and the wrong, between one who serves Elohim and one who does not serve him. Now, the phrase I want to address in this podcast is, then you shall see the difference between the righteous and the wrong, between one who serves Elohim and one who does not. Let's start with the following revelation. The fact that we will, in these last days, see the difference between the righteous and the wrong reveals that there was indeed a time when this difference was not as clear to see, to wit, the one who serves Elohim and the one who does not. My dear friends, this is just one of the many reasons why we know we are living out this prophecy. We know this because Malachi begins this prophetic word by saying, then shall those who fear Yahuwah speak often one to another. Per the timeline below, the first major event in this season was the call to walk in the way of holiness. To wit, after many years in which Yahuwah began to wake up the tribes of Jacob with a message of restoration, he commanded us to walk in the path that would allow us to realize the power of this message for us to be restored to him. Now, as we followed this command, we came to see how it is impossible to walk in the way of holiness if we operate in lawlessness. Ergo, the second major event in this season was a national turning away from lawlessness. For no one doing lawlessness will obtain the seal of Elohim. Notwithstanding, the majority in this nation refused to turn away from lawlessness, for they are spiritual tares in the field of the world. This led to the great falling away and the times of the great divide, where Satan enforced his agenda for division and spiritual genocide. Now, here lies the inflection. To wit, even though we have witnessed division within our nation, the great falling away is a spiritual event. And thus, the following is true. Consider this. While many were mesmerized and bemused by the great divide because of what they were seeing with their natural eyes, they were oblivious to the spiritual forces that were driving this division. To wit, the majority in this nation witnessed the great falling away, and yet they were blind to the spiritual nature of what they saw. And we know why. It is because the majority in this nation don't fear Elohim, and thus they could not see the spiritual forces behind the destruction of our nation, as Yahuwah has revealed it to you and to me. The two fates upon all who have been called. Now, the reason why Yahuwah has revealed the spiritual nature of division to us is because we fear him. For look, listen, it has been written, the secret of Yahuwah is with those who fear him, and he makes his covenant known to them. Look again, my friend, and listen. Listen. The fear of Yahuwah is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Ergo, because we fear Elohim, there is no knowledge and no secret that he will keep from us. Remember, it is given unto us to know the mysteries, i.e., the secrets of the kingdom of Elohim. Along these lines, we know why it was difficult for many to see the difference between the righteous and the wrong in the early days of this season. If you recall, in the parable of the darnel of the field, Yahuwah commanded his servant, saying, let both, i.e., the wheat and the darnel, grow together until the harvest, lest while you gather up the darnel, you also uproot the wheat with them. Now, this brings us to the question of the hour. Vis-a-vis, why did Yahuwah command his servants to allow the darnel and the wheat to grow together until the harvest? The answer is sure, and Yahuwah tells us it is because uprooting the darnel would have uprooted the wheat. And I will explain this matter with the following explication. At the time in which the tares appeared, the wheat was not ready for the harvest. Ergo, this resulted in a time within a season in which the wheat and the tares were forced to coexist. Now, to add to this complexity, the wheat and the tares are very similar in physical appearance. This is why those who are not being led by the set apart spirit will struggle to know who is who, which will lead them to mixing with the spiritual tares in our midst. We know this because the tares are in the majority, and as lawlessness is infectious, the tares have increased their majority since the start of this season. And still, this is the will of Elohim, and all a part of his master plan. Here is why. Although the tares are vessels unto destruction, Yahuwah is using them to prove the spiritual quality of his wheat, i.e., all who have been called. Along these lines, Yahuwah is employing the tares to serve as potential stumbling blocks for the wheat. The key word being potential. And thus, there are two fates awaiting all who have been called. On the one hand, the wheat will become infected by the tares and become casualties to the great falling away. And on the other hand, they will overcome the tares by the Tehudah of Yahushua Messiah, and they will enter into the covenant of restoration. Why some were infected and others did overcome. Now, these things being what they surely are, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: what is the determining factor upon all who have been called? That is to ask, why were some infected and thus destroyed by the tares, and how did others overcome them? The answer is sure, and we addressed it early on in this podcast, vis-a-vis the wheat who overcame the proliferation of the tares unlocked the power of the fear of Elohim. And because they obtained the fear of Elohim, Yahuwah wrote their names in the book of life. Not only this, but he opened their eyes to many secrets and mysteries, and he gave them knowledge. Now, as it pertains to the question at hand, to wit, why were the majority who were called infected and thus destroyed by the tares? It is because they never obtained the fear of Elohim. Alas, they were called to walk in the way of holiness, but they failed to complete their quest. To be precise, they never ascended to the plane of knowledge, and thus they were never able to distinguish between the wheat and the tares. And so, what did they do? Well, I'll tell you, they saw men and women who looked like them on the outside, and so they falsely assumed that they were men and women of like precious faith, when the truth is they were spiritual tares exuding lawlessness. And in the sure course of time, they became infected with the lawlessness of the tares they embraced, for the simple but sure fact that they didn't know they were tares. Now, the aftermath of this tragedy is heartrending, and I see no pending need to discuss it further. For many of the men and women who were done in by the tares had good intentions, and yet good intentions without truth and knowledge will prove to be very deadly in these last days. For look, listen, it has been written, a wise man sees evil afar off and he hides himself. But the simple go on and they are punished. Look again, my friend, and listen. Listen. A prudent man foresees calamity and he hides. Now, if you study the original text, you will understand that to hide in this context does not imply to run away as if you are afraid. Trust me, you have nothing to fear, for you are spiritually superior to all the false Hebrews in this nation. That said, the next question we must attend to is, what does to hide mean in this context? The answer is sure. It means to conceal, to be absent, to avoid, to be careful. Ergo, when we see the spiritual tares in this nation, we avoid them because we don't want to be infected by their lawlessness. Likewise, we are careful with them because they are offspring of the wicked one, and he can use them at any time to subvert us in our quest for the seal of Elohim. For that reason, we conceal ourselves from them, and we are absent from their presence. For we have been commanded not to greet them and not to invite them into our homes. Now, here again, this is Yahuwah's brand of division, which is not to exclude anyone except for those who have chosen to be excluded. To wit, he has separated us from the tares in this nation so that we can be unified, so that we can be saved. And this, my friends, is why Malachi prophesied, saying, then you shall see the difference between the righteous and the wrong, between one who serves Elohim and one who does not. This is the message. That said, you must always remember everyone can't see what you can see. And when you find men and women in this nation who are mixing with spiritual tares, you have been warned. The Most High doesn't care if they have good intentions. You better hide, for the next time you see them, they won't be spiritual wheat. For, as I say, being saved in these last days is a challenge of epic proportion and a death-defying feat. Now, here is the final word. Now you know the difference between the right and the wrong. So avoid the latter, and you will live long. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully. As I say, there is always a bit of discomfort, even for a watchman, when you are forced to call out anyone for their persistent transgressions. But it is immensely easier when the Ruach reveals to you the great damage they are doing. My dear friends, the spiritual tares are destroying this nation. The false Hebrews in our midst are infecting our people beyond spiritual recovery. And if the watchmen don't cry out against this satanic movement of destruction and death before it is finished, there will be no value in any discovery. Heretofore, I recommend, when the watchmen cry out, speaking on behalf of Elohim, to warn his people, listen. Otherwise, when Yahuwah counts up the people and the rule of Elohim is upon the earth, you, my friend, will be missing. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, The United Nation of Yisra'el, Part 3. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 526, The Spiritual Disease of Deception, Part 6. I will post this podcast on Monday, October 20th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused. For the end is coming. The end is near.